Every year, hundreds if not thousands of games get released, which leads to some being forgotten altogether. This happens the most with games that were released before some of us were even born. I think that sucks because a lot of those games are bangers, but there's no one to talk about them and spread the word to the youth. So for today, I will be the voice for those forgotten video games, starting with Pac-Man World 2 and 3. My journey with Pac-Man World 2 and 3 started when I was around 12. A kid around my age told me that he was selling his PS2 along with the Pac-Man Power Pack. This included Pac-Man World 2 and 3 along with a boring, useless, annoying racing game that I could never win at. Anyways, after buying it from him, my time would only be spent on playing these games non-stop. From the start all the way to the end, time and time again. This was because I didn't have a memory card, which meant that my progress was never saved. So even if I beat the game, it didn't matter since I had nothing to save it onto. I didn't mind though, I could practically play them blindfolded. Every detail about these games were engraved into my mind.
Oh, you're down there. Ew.
The soundtrack from World 2 would be on a non-stop loop in my head. The intro dialogue from World 3 was something that I could recite whenever, wherever. Actually, I vividly remember doing that on my first day of 3rd grade and everyone looking at me like a weirdo, which I was. Now, what made me like these games in the first place? I think it was because of just how simple they were.
Uh-oh. I'm detecting a rise in energy in your sector, Pac-Man.
Details of my sector's energy should be between me and Miss Pac. Thank you very much.
In Pac-Man World 2, you just go from point A to point B while trying not to die. And in World 3, you just do some side quests and then go on to the next level. There's nothing remotely difficult about these games, which was a positive for me since young Eber was pretty bad at video games back then. Another reason why I liked these games so much was because they were the only things I had to play. It didn't bother me since I would usually just take it as a challenge and see how far I could get before having to turn off the PS2. Years and years later, I find it weird how these titles have pretty much been abandoned by Bandai Namco. It's a shame because in my opinion they're great games that could benefit from a remaster or remake of any sort, although I do understand why. Bandai is a big company with tons of major titles being worked on at all times, so I doubt that they would spend their time and resources on a World 2 and World 3 project. In my perfect world, they would have a remake filled with all the content that was cut from each title. But I doubt that will ever happen. I do know that they recently released a World 1 remake, and although I haven't gotten around to play it, I've heard nothing but good things about it, so I'm very excited for that. A few months after I got the PS2 along with the Pac-Man games, me and my mom went to Goodwill. She told me to go look around and see if anything caught my eye, and if it did, she might consider getting it. I remember I went through the whole store and younger me didn't find anything cool or shiny, so I went to the checkout line with my mom. Next to the checkout line, there was this glass case with a bunch of random stuff in it. Clothes, shoes, random figures, clocks, you name it. But hidden behind all the random items, there was a PS2 game called Rayman 3 Hoodlums Havoc. The rest was history. Rayman 3 is like Mario 64, but better, in my opinion. You get these cool power-ups along with some fresh outfits. The story for the most part is pretty good along with the characters that at times make you question how this game got a rated E for everyone.
Get me something to drink or I'll suck up your intestine like an oversized piece of spaghetti!
My favorite part about this game when I was younger was probably Rayman himself. A cool guy that emotes after defeating the enemies on screen. As a 12-year-old who liked everything that was cool, of course I was gonna love this. The power-ups were also very cool to see because up to that point I hadn't seen anything like it. A power-up that lets you swing from area to area, or a punch that throws tornadoes. I mean, come on, you get what I'm saying, right? I remember liking every level, especially the ones where you're on a hoverboard just riding across different lanes while some groovy music is playing. Although I will admit that these levels did get me a tad bit angry when I was younger.
We will need to resort to drastic measures.
I remember each boss fight as well, seeing as I still didn't have a memory card, so I'd fight the same ones over and over again. I think my favorite boss was probably the shoe. Basically, Rayman would turn really small and he'd have to fight against one shoe while riding the other one. These levels of creativity have never been reached again, let's be honest. Ubisoft was prime LeBron James coming up with these ideas. That's why I like this game a lot, if I'm being honest. A silly game with a silly cast of characters in a silly world, I mean, what's not to love? So what's being done with Rayman nowadays? Nothing, like literally nothing. It's been a while since he's had a new game, but he's appeared in different media over the last few years. He was one of the main characters in that one Netflix show, and he appeared as DLC in Mario and Rabbids. I think this is another case of Ubisoft doing everything in their power to not be liked, because you have a great character like Rayman, and you're not doing anything with it. Now, what I'm about to tell you is a rumor, and it could very well be fake, but it could also be true. According to some insiders, there's currently a Rayman 2 remake being worked on, which is cool, but my main question is, will it ever release? My personal opinion is probably not, considering that Ubisoft is in their final hour, with each project they release doing worse than the one before it. I really hope that I'm wrong though. The last game I'll talk about today is 007 Nightfire. I'm gonna be honest with you and hold your hand while I tell you this. I really don't care for 007. I mean, don't get me wrong, you know, he's cool, he's a spy that does cool things and his theme is really cool, but that's about it. I feel like there's spies that do it better than he did. But anyway, let's talk about the game. If I remember right, I think I got this game at a garage sale and I played it for a few days and it just didn't click for me. I remember I told my friends about it and they felt the same way after playing it. The gameplay is probably the part that threw me off the most because it's so nauseating to play. When it comes to games, I can pretty much handle anything. But for some reason, the way this game played and felt made me so dizzy. Besides that, the game didn't have much else going for it. I remember I played the campaign and I just didn't really like it. I mean, looking back, I can see why I felt that way, especially when you compare something like this to a bright and colorful game like Pac-Man World 2. Although I didn't really like the game, something that always stuck with me was the cover art. The blue background with the gold 007 text was iconic in my opinion. Flash forward to present day, has anything been done with 007? From what I can tell, no. I think this sucks because I think we could have something incredible. Okay, imagine right now, a 007 game that plays like Metal Gear Solid 5. I think it could be crazy, but I guess we'll never know since there's been countless games that have been cancelled. Just this year, a trailer for a canceled LEGO James Bond game was leaked, and it showed what we possibly could have had. Looking back on all my memories with these games, it's a shame that for the most part, these characters have pretty much been ignored for well over a decade. To me, it's a surprise because these characters are pretty much iconic in their own right. I really doubt this will change in the future, but I hope I'm wrong. The main thing I'm wishing for is something related to Rayman, seeing as he's the one that's pretty much been erased from history.